Hi everyone, I'm back and we are picking up where we left off. We are discussing Romans chapter 11. And as I said in the first video of this series, that this is not in support of Zionism and the modern day nation of Israel. My focus is going to be on the idea of universal restitution or universal restoration from a preterist understanding, also known as Apocatastasis, which is the restoration of all things referred to in Acts 3:21, which I believe to be God's plan for humanity to save all people. And I believe that Paul taught this in the book of Romans. So for this series, we will continue on with Romans chapter 11, and I hope to be able to show you that as we go along. If you haven't listened to my first video, please stop this right now and listen to it so you can get the context of what I'm trying to say. In the first video, we discussed Romans 11, 1 through 5, also the process of threshing and the wheat and chaff, and that the chaff is thrown into the fire and burned as spoken by John the Baptist in Matthew 3:12. We will pick back up with Romans 11, verse 6. Okay, Paul says, but if it were by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. Their identity was no longer going to be found in their works of the law. He was bringing that system to an end. It was going to be found in Christ and his faithfulness to save them, not of their own works. God was pleading with them to embrace the new thing he was doing in the earth, which was a new and better covenant. Verse 7, what then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. For as it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see and ears that would not hear, down to this very day. Notice what the Greek says in verse 8. It says, God gave to them a spirit of vexation, of eyes to not see and ears to not hear, until today's day. The word until means a continuance. So this hardening was to continue until or up to the end of that age. And when we get to verse 25, we will see another word, until, that does refer to an end to their hardening. That word until is referring to the idea of a terminus. We will see that when we get to verse 25. When it says until today's day would be when this was spoken and written, which was Paul's day. Verse 9, and David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see, and bend their backs forever. Let's not forget what Paul said in Romans chapter 3. He said in verse 3, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? Think about it. Were they destined to eternal damnation due to their unbelief? Listen closely as Paul asks the question again. I ask, however, have they stumbled so as to be finally ruined? No, indeed. But by their lapse, salvation has come to the Gentiles in order to arouse the jealousy of the descendants of Israel. Paul is an example that God was not finished with them. I mean, after all, as I said before, he was murdering Christians before he was converted by Christ. So again, this partial hardening was for the purpose of evangelizing the nations. Verse 12. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? Now I am speaking to you Gentiles, inasmuch then as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry, in order somehow to make my fellow Jews jealous, thus save some of them. What was Paul trying to save them from? From the destruction that was soon coming upon them if they would not believe in Christ and the good news of the gospel message. Verse 15. For if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? This life from the dead is the resurrection of the dead that the book of Revelation speaks about in chapter 20. This was the hope of Israel, the resurrection of their last days. This was a spiritual resurrection of the spiritually dead, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Revelation 25 says, the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. According to most preterists, myself included, we believe that the 1,000 years ended at the destruction of the temple and burning of Jerusalem in 70 AD. I take it a little further than full preterists, though, to show you that according to this verse 25, the rest of the spiritually dead ones do end up coming to life sometime after the 1,000 years had ended. For some, it took going through the fire of affliction and purification to come to that realization that they were lost. That would be the full inclusion of what Paul was saying in Romans 11, verse 12. And according to Revelation 20, verse 14, death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire, metaphorically. It says, death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And let's not forget what Paul says about death in 1 Corinthians 15:26. It says the last enemy to be destroyed is death. And it's not talking about physical death, it's talking about spiritual death. So I believe it's safe to say that the death of Adam cannot be eternal. I think this is a good place to stop. We will pick back up with Romans 11:16 and finish out the chapter in part 3. So I hope you will join me, and don't forget, if you like the contents of these videos and would like to know more, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this message with others, because the message of the gospel truly is good news for all people.